you will find that they stopped at a number of places. From Kufa towards Sham, it was a journey you're looking at of around 11 days, and they would stop at different points. Some of the people of the villages where they would stop would welcome them. Others would be quite hostile towards them. And therefore there were a number of skirmishes which occurred in that period. And the skirmishes which occurred would normally occur between the people of that village and the soldiers of Ibn Ziyad, who were trying their hardest to go from Kufa to Sham as fast as they could. Therefore, when the family of Abu Abdullah would stop in these places, if they were welcomed and they were allowed to have a certain amount of freedom, depending of course on which city it is. For example, Baalbek, many of you know Baalbek in Lebanon. Baalbek today is a Shia stronghold. At that time they were the most hostile people towards Ahl al-Bayt. And they were very forthcoming and protective of the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad. And so what happened was, when they left Kufa, the first stop was Nakhayla, and then after Nakhayla they would continue. They even went past Tikrit, and would you believe Tikrit at the time was quite good with the Shia. So it goes to show you how things change. But where they would stop, either Kulthum or Sayyidah Zainab or Imam Zain al-Abidin would speak out. For example, if you look at Kulthum's role, and it's something I'm going to look at in a few nights inshallah in the main majlis, you see that one of the most memorable sermons was the sermon which was given by Kulthum alayhi salam in the court of Ibn Ziyad. There are three main sermons which were given in Kufa. The first of them was the sermon of Bibi Sukaina alayhi salam. It's a quite exquisite sermon. You can read it in the book The Tragic Saga of Karbala, published by Ansarian Publishers. It's also narrated in the current translation of Abu Mikhnaf's Maqtal. As you know, of the earliest Maqatils, the earliest one is Abu Mikhnaf's. It's been translated in the English language. Sukaina bint al-Husayn's sermon is there, Kulthum's sermon is there, and Sayyidah Zainab's sermon is there. And many of the sermons normally begin by saying, "O people of Kufa, people of deceit and fraud, derived of pride and honor, may your tears never dry, and may your calls never remain silent. You are like that lady who undoes the thread after it has become strong by taking the solemn oaths as a pretext for your corruption and annihilation. You are like the female servant who is busy in slandering and faltering. You are like the green weed which settles on animal excrement, or the silver that decorates the graves, beautiful in appearance, ugly within yourself. Do you know whose blood of whose house you have shed? Have you now ignited the wrath of the Almighty, and now you have made for yourself eternal punishment? Do you consider yourself the killers of Hussein? Do you cry over killing him? Cry a little and laugh a lot." And she continues in this way. So therefore, when she spoke out in her sermon in Kufa, she spoke out memorably in the same way Sheikh Muhammad said. That was azadari, speaking out against injustice. Her lines of poetry would be similar to the lines of Sayyidah Zainab, and similar to the lines of the others when they would come forward either on the 10th of Muharram or after the 10th of Muharram. The 10th of Muharram, normally what would happen is that there is a form of Arabic poetry which you would recite before you come out onto the battlefield. That Arabic poetry which you recite is a form of a majlis stroke masa'ib. Okay? Majlis stroke masa'ib means what? Means not a long majlis as we'd have from here, nor a masa'ib which tells you about what happened, rather 3 or 4 lines which tell the people who you are and what you feel. For example, Sheikh Muhammad mentioned beautifully Zuhair ibn al-Qayn. Zuhair ibn al-Qayn, when he came out on the 10th of Muharram, he recited 6 lines of poetry, which in a way was a majlis, in a way was a masa'ib. أنا زهير وأنا ابن القين أضربكم بالسيف عن حسيني إن حسينا أحد السبطين من عترة النبي الزكي الزيني ذاك رسول الله غير المين يا ليت نفسي قسمت قسمين. It's very powerful lines of poetry. And like each of the companions, you'll find, for example, John, the black Abyssinian, came out with some unbelievable lines of poetry himself, which I can narrate for you, anyone who wants the references. Likewise, Kulthum, when she was going to each of these villages, If the people asked her, what did you see at Karbala? She'd talk in poetry. Why? Because the Arabs are at a level where they discuss with you only in poetry. That's why Yazid, when he used to talk, Yazid used to only talk using poetry. He wouldn't talk with you in sentences. Yazid from one side is an Umawi. From his mom's side, he's a Kilabi. You're talking about the height of Arabic aristocracy. Grammar is unbelievable. When he talks to you, he only talks in poetry. He doesn't talk in anything else. And if you don't talk back to him in poetry, he thinks you're much lower than him in Arab status. That's why when Imam Zayn al-Abidin was asked, what do you think of Yazid? He said, he's a great poet. He said to me, you're not going to say anything else about him. He said, no, if you want me to abuse, that's not our character. But if you want to know what's good about him, he's got one trait, which is his poetry. So when Kulthum would speak in these different places, be it in Baalbek, be it in Tikrit, Halab, Hims, she'd use poetry to speak out against what happened in Karbala.
Thank you for your question. Do we have a question from the brother's side?
You can write them down if you want.
Yeah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think we all find that we come to majalis with an intellectual faham of what happened and an emotional charge and an affinity to what happened. But sometimes our qalb connects with the faculty of reason and emotion, and other times it doesn't. So the spark isn't there in the heart. Now, do you have any ideas on why sometimes the story we've done for many years strikes deep in the heart, and other times, we can sit and do matam, but it doesn't really break us? What's going on there?
First of all, thank you very much. First of all, we have to appreciate that the Holy Prophet of Islam in a narrated hadith says, إِنَّ لِقَتْلَ الْحُسَيْنِ حَرَارَةً فِي قُلُوبِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ لَا تَبْرَدُ أَبَدًا. That the words of the Holy Prophet of Islam is not from himself, everything is from revelation. The Holy Prophet of Islam says that the killing of my son Hussein, in that there is warmth and heat in the hearts of believers that will never extinguish. In other words, that if you look around the world today, nobody forces anyone to attend majalis, yet we find millions of people gathering in every corner of the world remembering Imam al-Hussein. So the idea is that a true believer displays this love or has this love in their hearts according to the Holy Prophet of Islam. When we come to analyze why we sometimes connect and sometimes do not connect, this reflects the broader idea of our existence. Ulama of Irfan, mysticism, say that human beings sometimes go through stages of ghafla. Ghafla means heedlessness, negligence, whereby Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ. They are individuals who forgot Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, thereby they will forget themselves. In other words, they will be walking people alive physically but spiritually dead. Some people are like that for a short amount of time, and then they are awakened. Things happened in their life, they recite one verse of the Quran that will awaken them. An individual who is an Arabi, Arabi means someone who has no knowledge, previous knowledge, not an Arabi. An Arabi comes in to the Holy Prophet of Islam, and he asks the Holy Prophet, he says, Ya Rasulullah, recite some verses of the Quran for me. He had never heard the Quran before, or he might have heard very basic or no number of verses. The Holy Prophet recites for him Surah Al-Zulzil, إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا وَأَخْرَجَتِ الْأَرْضُ أَثْقَالَهَا, until he says, فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَى وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَى. Whomsoever does an atom weight of good shall see the reward on the day of judgment, and whomsoever commits an atom weight of bad shall reap the punishment on the day of judgment. The man stands up and says, Kafa ya Rasulullah, that's it, I've listened enough. He walked out of the door. The Holy Prophet of Islam says what? Listen, he says, Ja'a A'rabi, he came as a man with no knowledge, kharaja faqiha. He has left this room, he is now a faqih. There's something you and I saying somebody is a faqih, and there is another that the Holy Prophet saying someone is a faqih. Why? Few verses of the Quran changed his life entirely, moved him from